what we'll do now is really kind of move into this idea of big data. So here is just a real basic definition of big data. And it's just that big data refers to data that is so large, fast, or complex that it's difficult or impossible to process using traditional methods. So traditional might mean, again, basic, whether it's Excel to do some analysis, and some basic charting and graphing. There's so much of it, it's captured so fast, and maybe it's very complex, right? We don't, what a consumer, what data gets captured about a consumer is almost infinite. And so there's so much information. So this concept of big data really started to gain some momentum, really almost 20 years ago. So it's not new, but it really has already and will continue, right, to change the way the world uses information. And it's something in our own organizations that, we are probably have been dealing with and will continue to be faced with. So a couple of the examples, right, of things where we are in a scenario where there's big data. So for example, if you're online and, what ads you see are targeted to you as an individual. And it's because data has been captured as to where you've clicked, right? What websites you visit, what videos you may be watching. So, there's a lot of data that gets captured to then target what you see when you are online. Or I think we talked about this example a little earlier, which piece of equipment in a manufacturing facility might not be running correctly. So this would be if you have your equipment that is, capturing its data around its, runtime or uptime. And then if it either stops or something is slowing down or there's some form of an issue, then that actually it might be automatically conveyed to some other system or IT system, and then potentially to some reporting and maybe even alerting process. Where you've traveled. So, most of us who use some form of a smartphone, we can turn on the location, and whether we want to find the nearest restaurant or find a gas station or, whatever it might be, find a person we'd like to visit and look up their address and get those directions. Well, every time we're using things like those location features, data is being captured of where we've been, right? What we've done in those locations, or like what you like to eat. For people that maybe do a lot of food ordering and they use certain, apps or things of that nature, same thing, that data is getting captured at a very high rate, for many, many consumers. And then, more things will be targeted to you for that reason. So, we've been seeing an increase in our ability to capture and store large amounts of data. And what that means is businesses, hospitals, government institutions, and many other types of organizations really rely on it to drive decisions. So decisions of what products should be offered, how to set policy, right? Where to build a fast food restaurant, or maybe most recent things around tracking COVID-19 cases and maybe testing. So while the use of big data is not new, any organization that really relies on it to make decisions, we need to consider the reliability of that data collected. So there's a saying which you may know or be familiar with: garbage in equals garbage out. So what that really translates to when we talk about data is if we're not collecting accurate, precise, stable data, then our resulting decisions, right, have a higher risk of being flawed. So we need to make sure we are assessing the quality of this data. So I mentioned three things. We really want to make sure our data is accurate, precise, and stable. So again, just because we have the ability to collect large amounts of data, is it that data is these three things? And the answer can often be no, it's not. So when we talk about accuracy, so measurements are accurate if they tend to kind of center around the average value of some measured entity, or there's a very small difference or deviation from the actual value. So using more of a hospital example, when they take measurements on the time to process a lab request coming from the emergency department, the average processing time values that, let's say, are recorded in the electronic medical record systems would match, or are very, very close to the true values of the lab processing time. So that would be more, that's more of an accuracy, that we're looking at values being, either matching or very, very close to an average value. So measurements are precise if they differ from one another by a small amount. So if we go back to the same example of the lab processing times from the emergency department, the processing times themselves are close to one another. They're not that far apart. And especially when we look at something that's maybe the same specimen using the same type of equipment, right? So similar types of measurements should be kind of close together. And then the last one is stability, which really means that our measurement system, however we capture our information, is able to produce, the same or again, very similar values over time. And so in this example, I'll switch to something different, is if we're weighing the amount of liquid in hand sanitizer in a sample of bottles, well, we want to make sure that the scale we're using to take the weight measurements, it generates the same or very close values over time. And that could be daily. And for the same sample of bottles. So if I take a sample of, 10 bottles and I measure them over 4, 5, 6 days or 2, 3, 4 weeks, the scale will give me those same measurements over time. And so that's one of the things we want to look at, is just this, the stability of our measurement system. So all three of these, we really want to keep in mind and consider as we look at, is our big data accurate? Is it precise? And is it stable? Because ultimately what we really want to do is minimize the risk of, some form of a faulty or improper decision.